Hello, and welcome back to this episode of the Rekindling the Legacy podcast. I'm Dr. Juhi Gupta,
And I'm Professor Andrew Davis.
and together we are here to retell the stories of some of the heroic women who fought for their freedom against all the odds and made India the nation it is today.
This podcast is coming to you courtesy of the Inclusive Futures Foundation. We are an Indian-based NGO that works on women and children's rights, on the environment, on education, on health, and on culture. And retelling some of the important stories from India's history is a really important part of our work around culture and history, but also around women and children. You can learn more about what we do at theinclusivefuturesfoundation.com.
We want to thank you for joining us on this journey where we discuss the lives and experiences of some of the underestimated, often unacknowledged pioneering women of India who shaped the history. And today we are meeting Kaumudi teacher. Andrew, please introduce us to Kaumudi.
Picture this scene. It is January the 14th, 1934, in a small town called Vatakara in Kerala. The great Mahatma Gandhi is addressing a crowd, asking people to donate their jewellery to help India's most oppressed communities. And as he's speaking, people begin coming forward, offering their ornaments and their jewels and their money. And then a 16-year-old girl approaches him. She's wearing the traditional jewellery of a girl from the royal family, bangles, necklaces, earrings, the kind of ornaments that represent not just wealth, but family heritage, social status, and future security. Gandhi looks at this young girl and asks her for just one bangle as a donation. Instead, she takes off every single piece of jewellery she's wearing and places it all before him. That girl was Kaumudi, and her story is about how one moment of courage and conviction can define not just a life, but inspire a movement. But what makes her story even more memorable is what happened next, and what she chose to do with the rest of her 92 years on this earth.
So Kaumudi was born on May 17, 1917 in Vatakara, which is now a part of Calicut in Kerala. She wasn't just from an ordinary family, as Andrew has rightly mentioned. She was from royalty. Her father, A.K. Ramavarma Raja, and her mother was Devaki Kattilamma. In the traditional social hierarchy of Kerala, she was born into privilege, wealth, and status. For most girls from royal families in 1970s, life followed a predictable pattern. You would be educated, just enough to be cultured, you would be married to someone of appropriate social standing, and you would live a life of comfort and respect within the boundaries that society had set for women of your class. But Kaumudi was different from the very beginning. As she grew older, her interest wasn't in the typical pursuit of a royal princess. Instead, she became fascinated by the Indian freedom struggle. She was watching her country fight for independence, and she wanted to be a part of that fight.
She completed her matriculation and then chose to study Hindi as a primary subject. That might not seem a particularly significant choice to us today, but in Kerala in the 1930s, it was a hugely political choice. Hindi was being promoted as a national language that could unite India, and studying it was a way of supporting the independence movement and promoting Indian unity. Kaumudi's expertise in Hindi led to her becoming a teacher at the Government Girls' High School in Malabar. So even before her famous encounter with Gandhi, she was already contributing to the independence movement through education, helping to prepare the next generation of Indian women for life in a free country.
But everything changed on January 14, 1934, when she was just 16 years old and Mahatma Gandhi came to Vatakara. Gandhi was touring India at that time to raise funds for the Harijan Sahai Samiti, an organization dedicated to uplifting the Dalit community, whom he called Harijans, or Children of God. He was also spreading awareness about the unjust practice of untouchability and trying to build a more inclusive Indian society. Kaumudi was an ardent follower of Gandhi and had always wanted to meet him. When she heard he was coming to her town, this was her chance. After Gandhi's speech that day, he made an appeal to the women in the audience to donate their ornaments to support his mission of helping India's most oppressed community. This was a common practice during the independence movement. Jewelry represented stored wealth that could be converted into funds for social and political causes. Many people started coming forward to donate their ornaments and money. Then Kaumudi approached Gandhi.
So try and put yourself in Gandhi's position for a moment. You're looking at a 16-year-old girl stood in front of you who's clearly from a wealthy family, wearing the traditional jewellery that marks her status and wealth. You might be expecting her to donate maybe just one piece of jewellery, perhaps a bangle or a ring or something. That in itself would be a hugely generous gesture from someone so young. But Kaumudi asked Gandhi for his autograph in exchange for her bangles, and as he watched, she began taking off every single piece of jewellery she was wearing, all her bangles, all her necklaces, all her earrings, and gave them to him. This wasn't what he'd expected at all. In fact, he told her it wasn't necessary for her to give all her jewellery, just one piece would have been enough. He asked her the crucial question, did she have her parents' permission to make such a significant donation? And Kaumudi didn't answer immediately, but later on Gandhi learned that her father was actually present at that meeting and supported his daughter's decision. That tells you something about the family that she came from. They were people who valued principles over possessions.
But Gandhi wasn't finished questioning her. He wanted to make sure she understood the implications of what she was doing. He asked her, "Then what will you do if you give me all this?" Her response became legendary. "I will wait until someone comes to marry me, not my gold." Think about the power of that statement. In 1934 India, a woman's jewelry wasn't just decoration. It was her financial security, her dowry, her proof of family status. Marriage arrangements often depended heavily on what a girl could bring to the marriage in terms of jewelry and wealth. By giving away all her ornaments, Kaumudi was essentially saying that she valued the cause of Indian independence and social justice more than her own financial security. She was willing to risk her marriage prospects, her social standing, everything for the cause she believed in.
Gandhi pressed her further, wanting to make sure she fully understood the implications of what she was doing. He asked, well, what if no such person comes? Meaning, what if you can't find somebody who will marry you without your traditional dowry? Her answer was even more remarkable. Then I wouldn't marry. This 16-year-old girl was prepared to remain single for the rest of her life rather than compromise on her principles. That was almost unthinkable at the time, where marriage was considered not just desirable, but necessary for a woman's social acceptance and security. And yet here is Kaumudi calmly stating that she would rather live life unmarried than marry somebody who valued her gold more than her character.
Gandhi was so moved by her response that he gave her his autograph with a message that became famous throughout India. He wrote, "Tumhara tyag tumhara abhushan hoga." Your sacrifice will be your ornament. That phrase captures something beautiful about what Kaumudi had done. She had literally given away her ornaments, but Gandhi was telling her that her sacrifice itself had become a kind of adornment that was far more valuable than any jewelry. The next day, January 15, 1934, Gandhi wrote a letter to Vallabhbhai Patel, who would later become India's first deputy prime minister, mentioning Kaumudi's sacrifice. He compared her to Annapurna. Annapurna is the goddess of food and nourishment, and suggested that her sacrifice would nourish the independence movement. But here's what makes Kaumudi's story even more remarkable. That moment of renunciation wasn't just a one-time gesture. It became the defining principle of her entire life.
After her encounter with Gandhi, she made a vow that she kept for the remaining 75 years of her life. She never wore ornaments again, ever. Imagine the discipline and commitment that required. For 3/4 of a century to live according to the principles she'd outlined as a 16-year-old. And true to her word about marriage, too, she remained unmarried throughout her life. She told Gandhi that she'd wait for somebody who'd marry her, not for her gold. And she never found that person. Or perhaps she never looked for him because she'd found a different kind of purpose. She continued her work as a teacher, becoming so beloved in her profession that she was known throughout her life and throughout the country simply as Kaumudi teacher. Teaching became her way of serving the independence movement and later the new nation of India.
But her contribution didn't end with independence in 1947. In 1951, she participated in the Bhudan movement as a disciple of Vinoba Bhave, who was one of the Gandhi's closest followers. The Bhudan movement was a land reform initiative where landowners were encouraged to voluntarily donate land to landless peasants. This was perfectly consistent with the principles Kaumudi had demonstrated as a 16-year-old. Just as she had voluntarily given up her personal wealth for a greater good, she was now supporting a movement that asked others to make a similar sacrifices. In 1972, she retired from her teaching career, but she didn't retire from service. She went to work in one of Vinoba Bhave's ashram in Tiruvananthapuram, and she regularly visited the famous ashram in Paunar and Sevagram where Gandhi had lived and worked. So for the last 37 years of her life, from age 55 to 92, she lived in ashrams dedicated to carrying forward Gandhi's vision of social justice and simple living. She had completely devoted her life to the principles she had embraced as a teenager.
Kaumudi teacher lived until August the 4th, 2009, when she died at the age of 92. On the day of her cremation, her family, friends, and many others came to pay their respects. The police offered a gun salute to honour her contribution to the nation, and a magistrate, on behalf of Kerala's chief minister, placed a wreath to commemorate her service. For 75 of her 92 years, from age 16 until her death, she lived according to the principles she'd articulated in that brief conversation with Gandhi. She'd never worn jewellery, never married, and had dedicated her entire life to education and to social service.
And as we always like to conclude our biographies by asking and answering this simple question, that what was her legacy? How her life has made a change, and what are the lessons that we can learn from her? So Andrew, what would you say about Kaumudi?
When I think about her legacy, Jihi, the thing that strikes me the most is the incredible consistency between her words and her actions. It's all well and good to make a dramatic gesture as a teenager when you're caught up in the emotion of meeting your hero. It's quite another to live according to that gesture for the next 75 years of her life. And I think, secondly, her story also challenges our assumptions about what constitutes a heroic life. She never led armies. She never gave famous speeches or held political office, but she influenced thousands of students as a teacher. She inspired countless people through her example. She demonstrated that heroism can be found in the quiet commitment to living according to your principles. Gandhi's message to her, "Your sacrifice will be your ornament," suggested that there was a different kind of adornment available to her. Instead of wearing gold and jewels, she could wear the beauty that comes from living according to your values. And that certainly shaped her whole life and her whole experience.
Yes, that 5 minutes conversation with Gandhi didn't just change Kaumudi's trajectory. It inspired thousands of other people who read about it, heard about it, or were taught by her. The fact that her story is still taught in Indian schools today, nearly a century after it happened, shows the lasting power of her example. Children across India learn about the teenage girl who gave away all her jewelry and lived her entire life according to the principles she declared at that moment. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode. What a remarkable woman Kaumudi teacher was, and how impactful her life has been. We hope her story inspires and uplifts you today.
Thank you once again for joining us, and we hope you'll come back next episode to hear another exciting and inspirational story. Do remember to like this episode if you can. Leave us a comment if you've got something you want to add, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.